HOA Karen installs barbed wire on my land and properties. Didn't know she'd end up in handcuffs. Get off my property, I shouted, my face red with anger. This is MY land, and you have no right to put up that barbed wire fence. Karen, the HOA president, sneered back, oh really? We'll see about that. This neighborhood has rules, and I intend to enforce them by any means necessary. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. There we stood, face to face, on the edge of my property, a line that had become a battleground. What started as a simple request for a fence had erupted into a full-blown war, with barbed wire as the latest weapon. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comment section, and don't forget to like, comment, and hit the subscribe button for more of these gripping stories. I never imagined that moving to this quiet De Pere neighborhood would lead to this moment. My family, my wife, and our 5 children with autism spectrum disorder, we just wanted a safe place to call home. Instead, we found ourselves locked in a bitter struggle against an HOA president who seemed to value uniformity over compassion, rules over reason. As I stared into Karen's cold, determined eyes, I realized this confrontation was just the beginning. Little did I know that her next moves would push the boundaries of legality, morality, and human decency. This wasn't just about a fence anymore, it was about justice, about standing up for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you. This is the story of how one woman's relentless quest for control led to actions that would shock the community, and how our family's fight for our rights would have consequences that none of us could have foreseen. It's a tale of power, persecution, and ultimately, the triumph of the human spirit. My name is Lisa Newman. I'm a mother of 5 beautiful children, all diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Our story begins in 2016 when we decided to move to the Naskertrack neighborhood in De Pere, Wisconsin. We were searching for a fresh start, a safe haven where our children could thrive without judgment or fear. De Pere, nestled along the Fox River, is known for its friendly atmosphere and tight-knit communities. The Naskertrack neighborhood, with its manicured lawns and cookie-cutter houses, seemed perfect at first glance. Little did we know that beneath this picturesque facade lay a rigid structure governed by an even more inflexible homeowners association. Enter Karen Burt, the HOA president. A woman in her mid-50s with a perpetual frown and a clipboard always at the ready. Karen took her role as the neighborhood's rule enforcer seriously, some might say too seriously. Her interpretation of the HOA bylaws was as strict as her perfectly coiffed hair, and her desire to maintain the neighborhood's appearance bordered on obsession. Our troubles began when we realized our children needed a fence. It wasn't a matter of aesthetics, it was about safety. Our doctors had strongly recommended it, explaining that for children with autism, a physical boundary could provide a sense of security and prevent dangerous wandering. With hope in our hearts, we approached the HOA board with our request. I'll never forget that meeting. We laid out our case, presented the doctor's recommendations, even offered to design the fence to match the neighborhood aesthetic. But as I spoke, I watched Karen's face harden, her lips pressing into a thin line. When I finished, she didn't even pause before responding. I'm sorry, Mrs. Newman, she said, her voice devoid of any real sympathy, but our covenant clearly states, no fences of any kind shall be allowed. Rules are rules. The other board members nodded in agreement, avoiding eye contact. In that moment, I felt a mix of disbelief and anger rising within me. How could they prioritize an outdated rule over the safety of children? Now, I want you to put yourself in my shoes for a moment. Imagine you're a parent, responsible for the safety and well-being of 5 special needs children. You found a solution, recommended by medical professionals, to keep your kids safe. But a group of people, hiding behind arbitrary rules, tells you it's not allowed. How would you react? What would you do next? As we'll see, this rejection was just the beginning. The battle lines were drawn, and Karen's next moves would push us to our limits. But remember, even in the darkest moments, there's always a glimmer of hope, if you're willing to fight for it. How would you react if your reasonable request for your children's safety was denied based on an outdated rule? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The weeks following the HOA's rejection of our fence request were filled with sleepless nights and constant worry. Every time one of our children wandered too close to the property line, my heart would race. We tried to explain the situation to them, but how do you make a child with autism understand invisible boundaries? Then came that fateful morning in early spring. I stepped out onto our front porch, coffee in hand, ready to watch the kids play in the yard as I always did. But something was different. Something was wrong. At first, I couldn't believe my eyes. Glinting in the morning sun, stretching along our property line, was a menacing row of barbed wire. My coffee mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the porch steps. I ran towards the fence, my mind reeling. Who would do this? Why? As I got closer, I saw her. Karen Burt, standing on the other side of the barbed wire, a self-satisfied smirk on her face. "Good morning, Mrs. Newman," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I hope you appreciate the new security measures we've implemented." My shock quickly turned to rage. "Are you insane?" I shouted. "This is dangerous. My children could get hurt." Karen's smirk never faltered. "Well, if you had followed the rules in the first place, this wouldn't be necessary. Consider this a deterrent." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This woman, this HOA president, had installed a potentially lethal barrier on my property, all to enforce some arbitrary rule. It was clear that reasoning with her was no longer an option. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and called the local authorities. As I waited for them to arrive, I watched Karen saunter back to her house, acting as if she hadn't just committed a serious offense. The police were as shocked as I was when they saw the barbed wire. They took statements, photographs, and assured us they would investigate. But I knew this was just the beginning. Karen had crossed the line, and it was time to fight back. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. We contacted lawyers, gathered evidence, and prepared our case. Finally, we filed a complaint in the United States District Court, citing violations of the Fair Housing Act. Our argument was clear. By denying our request for a fence and then installing dangerous barbed wire, the HOA was discriminating against our family based on our children's disabilities. But Karen wasn't going down without a fight. As news of our lawsuit spread through the neighborhood, she began her campaign of misinformation. Suddenly, neighbors who had once been friendly were giving us cold stares. We overheard whispers at the local grocery store, snippets of conversation that painted us as troublemakers, as people trying to ruin the neighborhood. Karen had rallied the HOA members against us, spreading lies about our intentions. She claimed we wanted to turn our property into a compound, that we were trying to devalue everyone's homes. Some neighbors believed her, while others seemed unsure, caught between their sympathy for our situation and their fear of property values dropping. The stress was taking its toll on our family. Our children, sensitive to the tension, were acting out more. My husband and I were barely sleeping, spending our nights strategizing and our days trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for our kids. But then, a glimmer of hope. Our case came before a judge for a preliminary hearing. As we sat in the courtroom, hearts pounding, I couldn't help but feel a sense of David versus Goliath. Here we were, one family, up against an entire HOA and their team of lawyers. The judge listened carefully to both sides. Karen's lawyers argued about property values and the sanctity of HOA rules. Our lawyers spoke passionately about discrimination, safety, and the rights of families with special needs children. After what felt like an eternity, the judge made his decision. He granted us a preliminary injunction, allowing us to build our fence while the case proceeded. The relief I felt in that moment was indescribable. For the first time in months, I felt like we could breathe again. As we left the courthouse, I caught sight of Karen. The look on her face was a mix of shock and fury. This battle was far from over, but we had won the first round. Looking back on those tumultuous months, I'm still amazed by the lengths some people will go to maintain control, even at the expense of others' well-being. But I'm also heartened by the power of standing up for what's right, no matter the odds. Have you ever faced discrimination or unfair treatment from those in positions of power? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might inspire others facing similar challenges. As we moved forward with building our fence, we thought the worst was behind us. But Karen had one last card to play, one that would have consequences none of us could have foreseen. Stay tuned to find out how this neighborhood dispute took an unexpected turn, leading to consequences that would shock us all. As we entered 2025, the legal battle that had consumed our lives for years finally reached its conclusion. In August 2024, a settlement was reached, requiring the NASCAR Track Property Owners Association to pay us $200,000. This wasn't just a victory for our family, it was a statement about the rights of families with special needs children. The settlement, however, came with a bitter twist. The $200,000 would be paid by all association members, amounting to $1,350 per household. This decision sent shockwaves through our community, dividing opinions and stirring up emotions that had been simmering for years. As the dust settled, the truth about Karen's actions began to surface. Her rigid enforcement of the no fences rule, her refusal to consider our family's unique circumstances, and her role in rallying the community against us came under scrutiny. The pressure mounted, and eventually, Karen resigned from her position as HOA board president. The community's reaction was mixed, but surprisingly supportive. Many of our neighbors, who had been silent observers throughout this ordeal, finally spoke up. They expressed their frustration with the board's actions and their support for our family's need for the fence. One neighbor confided, "If the board had polled us as members, a large amount of the members would have said, 'Absolutely, let the family do what they need to do to take care of their family.'" This case has had a profound impact on HOA policies and raised awareness about the rights of families with special needs. It sparked conversations about the balance between community standards and individual needs, especially when it comes to accommodating disabilities. HOAs across the country are now reassessing their policies, recognizing that flexibility and compassion are essential in creating truly inclusive communities. As I reflect on this journey, I'm struck by the power of standing up for what's right. There were moments when the obstacles seemed insurmountable, when it felt like we were fighting an entire system. But we persevered, not just for our family, but for all families who might face similar challenges in the future. Our story has had implications beyond our neighborhood. It's become a cautionary tale for HOAs about the importance of considering reasonable accommodations under the Fair Housing Act. Legal experts are now citing our case in discussions about HOA responsibilities and the rights of residents with disabilities. The aftermath of the settlement has been complex. While some neighbors have paid their share of the settlement, others are resistant. This has created tension in the community, but it's also opened up important dialogues about inclusivity and the true meaning of being a good neighbor. As we move forward, our hope is that our experience will serve as a catalyst for change. We envision a future where communities are more understanding and accommodating of diverse needs, where the letter of the law doesn't overshadow the spirit of compassion. What lessons can we learn from this story about standing up for what's right, even when faced with seemingly insurmountable obstacles? As you ponder this question, consider how you might apply these lessons in your own life. Have you ever been in a situation where standing up for what's right seemed daunting? How did you handle it? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Our journey didn't end with the settlement or the fence. In many ways, it was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where we continue to advocate for understanding and inclusion. Stay tuned as we explore the lasting impact of this case and what it means for communities across the nation. As we come to the end of our story, I want to take a moment to speak directly to you, our viewers. This journey has taught us invaluable lessons about standing up for what's right, the power of community, and the importance of understanding our rights. To every homeowner out there, I urge you, educate yourself. Know your rights. Understand the Fair Housing Act and how it applies to HOAs. Don't assume that just because a rule exists, it's just or legal. If you find yourself facing an unjust HOA practice, don't be afraid to speak up. Your voice matters. For those of you in positions of authority within HOAs, I implore you to lead with compassion. Rules are important, yes, but they should never come at the cost of a family's well-being or safety. Be open to reasonable accommodations. Remember, behind every house number is a family with unique needs and circumstances. To families with special needs children, know that you are not alone. There are laws protecting your rights, and there are people and organizations ready to support you. Don't be afraid to advocate for your family's needs. Our experience has shown us the true power of community support. To those neighbors who stood by us, who spoke up when it mattered most, thank you. Your support made a world of difference. It's a reminder to all of us, be that supportive neighbor. You never know when your voice might be the one that tips the scales towards justice. Persistence in the face of adversity is not easy. There were many times when we felt like giving up, when the fight seemed too hard. But we persevered, not just for ourselves, but for every family that might face similar challenges in the future. Remember, change often starts with one person, one family, one community standing up and saying, "This isn't right." As we move forward, let's carry these lessons with us. Let's build communities that value inclusivity, compassion, and understanding. Let's create neighborhoods where rules serve the people, not the other way around. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If our story has touched you or inspired you in any way, we encourage you to share it. Your voice, your actions, can make a difference. Remember, in the face of injustice, silence is not an option. Stand up, speak out, and be the change you want to see in your community. For more information on homeowners' rights and resources for families with special needs, check the links in the description below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that matter. Together, we can build stronger, more inclusive communities. Until next time, this is Lisa Newman, reminding you that every voice counts and every family matters.